Scripture reading for this morning is found in the book Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 8 to start. And we're going to read through to chapter 3, verse 5. Starting in the Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 8, reading through to chapter 3, verse 5. The word of the Lord says this: "Listen, my lover, look, here he comes, leaping across the mountains, bounding over the hills. My lover is like a gazelle or a young stag. Look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, peering through the lattice. My lover spoke and said to me, 'Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, and come with me. See, the winter is past, the rains are over and gone. Flowers appear on the earth, the season of singing has come. The cooing of doves is heard in our land. The fig tree forms its early fruit. The blossoming vines spread their fragrance. Arise, come, my darling, my beautiful one, come with me. My dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the hiding places on the mountainside, show me your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. Catch for us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, our vineyards that are in bloom. My lover is mine and I am his. He browses among the lilies. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, turn, my lover, and be like a gazelle or like a young stag on the rugged hills. All night long on my bed I looked for the one my heart loves. I looked for him but did not find him. I will get up now and go about the city, through its streets and squares. I will search for the one my heart loves. So I looked for him but did not find him. The watchmen found me as they made their rounds in the city. Have you seen the one my heart loves? Scarcely had I passed them when I found the one my heart loves. I held him and would not let him go till I had brought him to my mother's house, to the room of the one who conceived me. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and by the does of the field, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires." Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for your voice and your presence in our lives. And I pray that that presence will be magnified this morning. I pray that your presence would increase, that our human, earthly presence would decrease, and that this really would become a place that is ordained and anointed by you this morning. Work in our hearts, work in our minds, and draw us unto yourself. Amen. All that to say, we get to this passage, Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 8 through chapter 3, verse 5. And if you're new to joining us, we're taking the month of January early into February and going through the book of Song of Solomon, speaking about marriage, talking about relationships and the importance of them. And today we come to this passage, these approximately 16 verses, that deal with the subject and the issue mainly of courtship. If you're reading through it, and that's what we're going to come to today, that's what we're going to talk about, that's what's going on during this passage. You've got Solomon, and you've got the Shulamite woman. What do we know about her? We know she's a plain girl. We know she's a peasant. She doesn't come from wealth. She doesn't come from prosperity. And Solomon is who? Solomon is the king. So you got those dynamics playing in this relationship that is just at its early stages, at its beginning stages. And these two young lovers are beginning to court each other. And it's obvious as you read through this passage that the love they have for one another really isn't cooling off right now. The screws are starting to get tight and it's starting to heat up a little bit. You can't read through that passage and not come to this conclusion. Why are we talking about it? Why are we going over it? First, it's in there. But what is the purpose of courtship? If we're talking about courtship today, what is the purpose of courtship? A lot of times in modern day, we call it dating. We don't call it courtship anymore. And we could argue that there's a difference between dating and courtship. And I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of that today. And yes, there is a difference in it. Okay? But similar type thing in many ways, where it's two people getting to know each other, getting to figure out if they're prepared to spend their lives together. Why would we talk about courtship? I've never been in the military. I just never enlisted. I've never gone through boot camp. I've always been curious what boot camp would be like. Could I do it? Would I be strong enough? Would I be tough enough to handle it? Probably not anymore. Maybe in my younger days, now I'd break in half and my back would be crooked sideways and stuff like that.
But what is the purpose of boot camp? As I'm thinking about boot camp, what's the purpose of boot camp? In my civilian mind, there's two things I can think of for being the purpose of boot camp. First purpose is to prepare whoever's enlisted in whatever branch of the service they're enlisting in for their future career, for their future job, for their future profession, what they're going to be doing in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, whatever it is they're going to be doing. The boot camp has got to start to weed people out, to physically prepare them for that job and to start their training in it. The second thing I think that boot camp does is it gives the instructors an indication of what the strengths and weaknesses are of each individual. Because people, I'm sure, enlist in the military, enlist in service to try and do something that they're not always the most prepared for. So in other words, if I'm a boot camp instructor and I know that this guy's going to be coming in for training as a sniper and he's got an itchy trigger finger, am I really going to want to have him as a sniper? Probably not. If I'm training another guy to be a battalion leader or commander, I don't know the official terms or whatever it is, and this guy can't give directions under pressure, do I want him leading my company? Or if I'm training somebody as a paratrooper who is afraid of heights, do I want to have them be a paratrooper? Obviously not. It's that weeding out process, that figuring out the dynamics process, and that's much of what's going on in courtship here. They're trying to answer the question or figure out the answer to the question, am I willing to give my heart to someone who is willing or unwilling to commit to me? Are you willing to give your heart? And is the person that you're giving your heart to willing to give their heart in return? Because it can't just be a one-way street. The language of this passage is obviously a little bit unique. I mean, we don't speak in these tones anymore. Read chapter 2, verse 8. Listen, my lover, look, here he comes, leaping across the mountains, bounding over the hills. She's not talking about Superman here. Okay, that's not what she's implying, like skyscraper and planes and this and that. No, look, here he comes, leaping over the mountains, bounding over the hills. What does that mean? You don't hear people talk like that today, but there's similar analogies. Look, when you're a teenager, and this probably applies, I'm going to date myself more to myself when I was a teenager than teenagers now, because when I was a teenager, we didn't have cell phones. There was 1 or 2 phones in the house. It was cool when we had a cordless phone. I remember we got our first cordless phone. Wow, we don't have to be attached to the wall anymore. That's great, right? But if you were expecting a phone call for somebody that you were romantically interested in, and that phone rang, you were on the edge of your seat, weren't you? You're hoping that your parents or your brother or sister didn't pick up the phone in the other room at the same time upstairs and start listening in on your conversation. Right? But you're waiting for that. You're anxious for it. You're waiting for that call to come in. That a sense of excitement, that sense of anticipation, that sense of nervousness, all kind of wrapped up together about this phone call. And that's how she feels here. I mean, look, we don't use those same words, but if you listen to country music, we do use similar words, don't we? We use very similar words. Here's the lyrics to a song sung by Dierks Bentley. Maybe you know this. I wish I could sing it, but I can't. Becky was a beauty from South Alabama. Her daddy had a heart like a 9-pound hammer. Think he even did a little time in the slammer. Anybody know the next line? That's right. What was I thinking? Well done. See, it takes guts to actually speak up. I love it. She snuck out one night, met me by the front gate. Her daddy came out waving that 12 gauge. We tore out the drive. He peppered my tailgate. What was I thinking? Exactly. Same type thought, isn't it, though? The young lover leaping, coming over the mountains. In this case, in our country music, what is? Dude coming in his driveway, ripping in his truck so dad doesn't get him before I get in the truck with him. It's that same type of concept, that anticipation, that excitement, all wrapped up in there. So I want to go through about 4 points in this passage after I have it set up of what's going on here. Point number 1. One thing we can't miss in this passage is there really isn't much that love won't do for one another, is there? I mean, I think back to when I was dating my wife. She was in college. She started college shortly after we started dating, and she was at Millersville University. Millersville is more on the southern part, towards the southern part of Lancaster. I lived in the northwest, and every weekend she would come home. Now, if we were dating, I don't know that she still would have chosen to come home every weekend, but every weekend she chose to come home. And every Sunday night when it was time for Laurie to go back to Millersville, I would gladly drive her back to college. I didn't want her parents driving her back to college. I wanted to drive her back to college because we were newly dating. I mean, I was infatuated with her. I wanted to be with her. I wanted to spend time with her. To be honest with you, I really don't enjoy the trip to Millersville. If you were to ask me to drive it now, there's nothing about it I like. You got to go through Worstown or you got to go through Lancaster, which is just traffic lights galore. I mean, it takes about the same time to drive almost here to Williamsport as it does from my parents' house or Laurie's parents' house to Millersville, and it's only about 7 miles, right? It's just not a fun drive. But did I care? Absolutely not, because it was a fun drive. I got to spend time with the person that I had an infatuation with, the person that I was dating, the person that I wanted to be with and be around. I mean, I look back, how about on our first couple dates? I'll be perfectly honest. On our first couple dates, my wife, when we were dating, did not get home till, I don't know, well after way too late. How's that? Right? I mean, we would go out, we'd grab dinner, we went to the fair at Elizabethtown on one of our initial dates, I remember, and we would go back and we would just talk and we would chat. And I worked construction at the time, and I had to be at work by about 6 in the morning. And basically what it came down to is till I would take her home at well after way too late, and I would come back to the house, I had enough time to take a shower, to eat breakfast, and to go to work. Now, you don't function really well when there's not much sleep involved. And I am a morning person. I don't like staying up late. Put me in bed early, let me go to sleep. Do you think I cared that I didn't get any sleep? Absolutely not. Because I was with the one I wanted to be with. Turn to verse 9 with me. My lover is like a gazelle or a young stag. Look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, peering through the lattice. What we got to understand is her lover has just journeyed to see her. Solomon has traveled to see the Shulamite, to see this woman, and it is at this moment when his wishes are about to be realized that he watches from the distance. He peers through the lattice. Again, what is he doing? He's soaking in the reality and the beauty of this moment. Did you ever get or have something happen to you that was just so good and so right and so perfect that you didn't want it to end? Have you ever had that moment? Because that's the moment that Solomon is in right here. See, whether we want to admit it or not, guys oftentimes hesitate. And that's what Solomon was doing. He was looking and going, this is it. This is it. Guys, we hesitate though, don't we? I mean, again, for some of us, we're going to have to dial it back a couple years, right? But when you called up a girl that you liked on the phone for the first time, and again, back then, not everybody had their own cell phones, so you may be getting her parents to answer, you may be getting a sibling or things of that nature. But how many of us actually walked right up to the phone and was like, all right, here we go, right? If you're anything like me, you walked up the phone, you went, I can do this, I can do this. Okay, think of things to say, right? If we run out of conversation, what can I say? What if she says no? It's no big deal. All right, pick it up. Hold on. What's the number again, right? And you go through this process. That's called hesitation. Guys, you did it too. Maybe not all the time, but I guarantee you did it too. Why? Because we hesitate. Or how about when you went over to her house for the first time and you were walking up the sidewalk to her front door to meet her parents? Did you get out of the car, pull up the car, get out and be like, all right, here we go, right? You sit in the car, you're going, do I really want to go through with this? Right? Is this really what I want? Well, yes, because I care about this person, so I have to meet the parents. Guys, we hesitate on our first kiss. Solomon hesitated. He hesitated because it was so good. He wanted to soak in the moment. Verses 10 through 13, my lover spoke and said to me, arise, my darling, my beautiful one, and come with me. See, the winter is past, the rains are over and gone. Flowers appear on the earth, the season of singing has come, the cooing of doves is heard in our land. The fig tree forms its early fruit, the blossoming vines spread their fragrance. Arise, come, my darling, my beautiful one, come with me. You really get a sense in those 4 verses, don't you, of springtime. The winter is finally coming to an end. And I know many of you are probably daydreaming about that happening today, right? But you'll appreciate it much more in 2 months, won't you? The longer the winter, the sweeter the spring. We don't know how long this winter was, but that is what is happening. The winter is ending. Spring is coming. And the promise that spring brings along with it is what's going on here. And you could just waiting for the Sound of Music to start playing over, right? All right. I mean, think about it though. Does the changing of the seasons, the changing from winter into spring, help to encourage young love, or does it hinder young love? Well, I think we all know the answer to that, don't we? I I mean, how many high schools hold their senior proms in the wintertime? You don't hold it in the middle of the winter. You hold it when it's nice outside. Or how many reality television shows have you seen about Alaska? About 5 million. But how many reality television shows have you seen about the love in Alaska in the middle of the winter? None. Hey, there's 4 hours of daylight. Let's show how much this couple loves each other. You don't hear those romance stories or those stories coming from situations like that because it's in the summer, it's in the spring. It's the time where we can be outside. And you get the idea reading through this verse is that because of love, everything is right. Everything is perfect with the world for them. And doesn't love tend to do that to us? Doesn't love help reset our priorities? It gives us a different outlook on life. I mean, yesterday I was up in Morris, Pennsylvania, a camp called Three Springs, and I was speaking to a youth group. I did a session in the morning and a session in the evening. And it took me back as I was driving home last night. I was A, kind of fatigued. It's been a long week. I was just tired. And B, I was reflecting on my own experiences growing up in the church and going to youth retreats and some of the sweet memories that it brought along. And I can remember coming back when I was, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, going on a retreat and then the drive home. And I loved the drive home, but I hated the drive home because it was back to reality. But my soul was always so full from those weekends. It was just filled to the top from the experiences that I've had, both fellowship, the physical experience being with my friends and youth leaders, but then the spiritual aspect, the emotional drawing close to God, that my heart was always just so full during those times. So I'm not just talking about the love between a man and a woman and the physical love between one person and another. I'm also talking about the love of God to us. It's that time when our heart is full. John Milton, the English poet, wrote in the poem Paradise Lost. I found this week, and I hadn't read this since my senior year in high school, and I think there was a reason for that. But he describes in his poem the relationship between Adam and Eve. And he says these words, with thee conversing. This is how John Milton portrays Adam and Eve. With thee conversing, I forget all time. All seasons and their change, all please alike. This infatuation with each other. And it sounds about right, doesn't it? I mean, we know that Adam was completely taken with Eve. The scripture records it. Genesis chapter 2, verse 28. He looks at her and he is infatuated. The Shulamite and Solomon are going through the same thing right now. They're running the gamut of emotions and experiences. But then we get to verse 14. My dove in the clefts of the rock and the hiding places on the mountainside, show me your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. This leads us right into point 2. Point number 2 is it is their desire to know one another fully, but also to be fully known. See, the indication in verse 14 is that the female is being shy. Let me read it again. In the hiding places on the mountainside, show me your face, let me hear your voice. She's being shy. Does she have reason to be shy? Well, on the surface, we look at it and we go, no, because she's in love with Solomon. We know that Solomon is in love with her. But we must remember the circumstances in the situation, that this woman is what? A peasant. She comes from extremely low and humble backgrounds. And Solomon is the king of Israel. Would you be shy if you were her? Abso-stinking-lutely. Absolutely. But what does Solomon want? Solomon, show me your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. This king wants his woman to reveal herself. He finds her delightful. And yet she still hides. Do you ever pick up a turtle when it's walking across the road or a sidewalk or something like that? I mean, what's the turtle's first reaction? Right? Exactly. He goes in that shell. And as much as you may want him to come out, and as much as you know that you're not going to harm him, you just want to see him. So you start poking him, or if you're anything like my kids, you start poking him to try and get him to come out and stuff like that. You just want to see the turtle. But the turtle's not sure. The turtle is shy. He doesn't know exactly what's going on, and so he hides. It is only if the turtle fully trusts you that the turtle is going to come out of his shell. And that's kind of where she's at right here. Solomon wants her to reveal herself, to see her face, to hear her voice. Why? Because she is beautiful to him. But this is not as easy as it sounds for a simple country girl. I mean, it comes across almost like a little bit of a cat and a mouse game, doesn't it? I mean, they're infatuated with one another. And it's as though they know this day, this time, this moment is so special that they're kind of waiting for it to start. I mean, you've heard the saying, the anticipation of something is better than the actual thing itself. You know, like and I use that analogy when we're at an amusement park and you're on that one roller coaster that you've always wanted to go on. Like, and you wait in line for hours because that's how the good roller coasters always are. Nobody waits in line for hours for a bad roller coaster. We wait in line for good ones. And you're finally in the front, and I always sit in the very front car. That's just how I roll. That's what I like. I love being in the front car. I think it's more of a thrill. And so you wait extra long to get in the front car. And there's that moment, right? The moment when the car comes back, the people in front of you, the roller coaster train comes in, right? The bar comes up, the people get out, and now you're waiting for that bar to open in front of you, you know, and it opens, and you walk, and you sit down in that car, and you put your lap belt on, you tie your thing down, you're ready to go. That, to me, is the best moment of the ride. And the reason I say that is because the ride is still in front of you. Like, it's still in front. That anticipation, that excitement, you know it's coming, you know it's inevitable, you know it's going to happen. And so I cherish that time right before the ride starts. So I'm like, that's right, I get to sit down. I'm in the front. All you other people still have to wait, right? That moment, waiting for it, and that's where they're at. I mean, think about it this way. If you were super hungry, and somebody came up to you and go, hey, here's a pizza, go at it, right? You go, all right. Now, if you're super hungry and somebody comes up to you, hey, here you go, here's a nice filet mignon. What are you going to do? Are you going to chow down on the filet? You're not. You're going to cut the filet up and you're going to put it in your mouth and you go, oh, that is so good. Right? That's where we're at. That's what we're talking about. That's the moment that Solomon and the girl are experiencing here. See, they weren't interested in a fast and easy relationship. She wanted it, she desired it, to be in it for the long haul, to love one another deeply over a period of time. And Solomon, out of all people, obviously realized that girls who are in it for a quick fling are a dime a dozen. Solomon was a man of means, he was a man of popularity, he was a man of money. He would have grown up with women around him all the time who wanted him because of that. And later on in his life, he did give into that. Don't forget the 700 wives, 300 concubines bit. But not here, not now, not at this moment. He wanted her and her alone. He desired God's blueprint for his life, a process of self-revelation as you get to know one another more deeply and more passionately, body and soul, for a lifetime. And folks, isn't that what marriage is? Isn't it the disclosure of another person? Isn't it disclosure of you and another person, of who and what you really are? It takes time, it takes intentionality, it takes work. This is courtship. Going through the process of forming a relationship without getting too mired down in the aspect of love. And I say that and you kind of go, whoa, Scott, what does that mean? Well, the saying love is blind just didn't come from nowhere, did it? And when a courtship or a dating relationship or something like that goes too fast, you don't have time to work through many of the issues. During infatuation, we only see the good and we miss many of the warning signs. Which leads us to point 3. In the middle of relationships, guess what? You're going to have problems. Whether it be a marriage relationship, a friendship relationship, or any type of relationship you come across, you will have problems. Verse 15, catch for us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin our vineyards that are in bloom. Has anyone in this room ever had a completely worry-free relationship in their lives? Right, exactly. I mean, it doesn't have to be big problems all the time, does it? It doesn't have to be the elephant type of problems. Maybe it can be the small problems like a cunning fox. And oftentimes it is the small problems. I mean, if you would turn back to chapter 1, verse 6, what is the woman talking about? She's been talking about working in her vineyard, and she's been so busy doing that she has neglected, she's working in other people's vineyards, that she's neglected her own vineyard. What does that represent? It represents the love that she has not yet given to a man. And what are they talking about again in chapter 2, verses 15? The vineyards come up. The foxes come in and ruin our vineyards that are in bloom. She is talking about their love or their courtship. And just as love is beginning to bloom, the foxes come into the courtyard, into the vineyard, and what? Spoil it. So we don't know exactly what these foxes represent. Maybe the small, seemingly insignificant, irritative type of problems. Maybe it's like the pee in the mattress, right? There's a pee in the mattress, so we cover it up with another mattress, but you can still feel the bump and the bump and the bump. And just keeping more mattresses on top of it is not going to solve the problem. What do you have to do? You have to take the pee out. That little irritation, it's like getting sand in your shoe. Doesn't take much sand to irritate your foot. This happens. But Scott, you say, they're in love. They're a young couple. They're in love, right? They don't have irritations in their relationship. That's right. And women like when you leave this toilet seat up, don't they, men? Right? And men, we love to go shopping, don't we? Right? They're in love. Love is blind. No, problems happen. Why do I say that? Because every person who has ever existed has faults in their lives. All of us, no one is exempt. I'm sorry if you think you are, you're not. Everyone has faults, and because we have faults, because we are sinful beings, we're going to have irritations and things that come between us. We're not perfect people. And isn't it really good that this happens in the long run? Isn't that part of what courtship is about? To see one another's imperfections and shortcomings. I mean, you don't want to get into a marriage relationship and then learn the shortcomings of your partner. Think about it. Proverbs chapter 30, verse 33 says this, "For as churning the milk produces butter, and as twisting the nose produces blood, so stirring up anger produces strife." Strife is going to happen. Irritations are going to wear on each other. The question is, do you understand this and agree to deal with them in a biblical fashion, in a biblical manner? That's part of the appeal of courtship, to see and deal with the faults of one another and realize the imperfections in the other person. To what? To catch the foxes. The foxes are in, but you've got to deal with them. You can't just ignore the fact that there's foxes in your vineyard, just like you can't ignore that there's conflict in every relationship. So what do? Proverbs 15:18 gives some great advice. "A hot-tempered man stirs up dissension, but a patient man calms a quarrel." If a couple squabbles about the little things before they're married, then there's probably a very good chance that they shouldn't get married. Because little things very rapidly turn into big things. And if you can't figure out how to handle the little things, you'll never be able to handle the big things when they come along. I mean, James chapter 4, verse 1, I think nails it on the head. What do the quarrels, what do the squabbles, the big, the small, where do they come from? Where do they have their basis? James chapter 4, verse 1. What causes fights and quarrels among you? James says, don't they come from your desires that battle within you? 5-letter word, it's called pride. Pride. Wanting or needing to be right all the time. Does your pride allow you to admit that you're wrong? Does your pride allow you to ask for forgiveness? Or is it more important to you to always be right? Last point. One that you sense in this passage. There is a growing desire for this couple in intimacy and possession by one another. Chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. Sorry, that's my second to last point. Don't get too excited. Verses 16 and 17, "My lover is mine, and I am his. He browses among the lilies until the day breaks and the shadows flee. Turn, my lover, and be like a gazelle, or like a young stag on the rugged hills." Her desire is to possess him, but her desire is also to be possessed by him. And this statement that I just made would cause many people in our society to cringe and go, "Scott, did you really say that, and did you really mean it?" Because I said her desire is to be possessed by him. And yes, I absolutely meant it. It's interesting. My wife and I were looking at changing television providers. So I called up DirecTV the other week. And I said, "Hey, I see you got this deal going on. Give me the lowdown on it. You know, what's this, that, and the other thing?" I said, "What kind of contract would I have to sign, right?" And this wonderful, awesome lady, I'll tell you what, we didn't sign with them, but DirecTV really does have good customer service. I mean, they were great every time I called. But I said, what kind of contract is it? She said, oh, no, sir, you don't understand. It's not a contract. I said, what do you mean? She said, you don't sign contracts with us. We don't do contracts. We do agreements. I said, okay, what's the difference? And she went into this elaborate 2-minute discussion of how it's two very different things, and it doesn't mean the same thing. So I said, so if at the end of year 1 I would want to get out, well, then you're penalized for year 2, and you'd have to pay this amount. I said, so basically it's a contract. No, sir, we don't do contracts. We do agreements. I mean, what's the contract of a professional athlete worth these days? Hardly worth the paper it's written on, because there's all these clauses that they can get out, or they just don't feel like playing, then they'll get signed by another team anyway. Right? I mean, you look at contracts in our society, and it kind of just, what's the deal? What's the point? What's the purpose? Because they're not worth the paper they're on. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 says this, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. Why do I bring that up? Because the contract of the marriage relationship provides security. The contract of God's covenant with us provides his love to us. And I've so often heard the saying that we love each other. We don't need marriage to prove our love. Folks, marriage is the contract that binds. If you are not willing to give totally of yourself in a relationship, then you're really not committed to it, are you? If you're not willing to give yourself totally, you're not really committed. But you say, Scott, I know people that have lived together a very long time. They didn't get married, but they lived together and they enjoyed life and they love one another. Guess what? So do I. I know people like that too. But when you can't truly, honestly, heartfelt give yourself to that person in a marriage covenant or a marriage relationship, you cannot experience the intimacy that comes with fully letting go. That is a peace that can only be found on the other side of marriage. There's a peace that can only be found on the other side of commitment. But the flip side is also true as well. Just because you have committed yourself in a marriage relationship doesn't mean that you automatically have that depth in your relationship. Many married couples negate this intimacy and possession of one another and wonder why their relationship is struggling. Folks, possession is a part of marriage. And if we look at this Solomon and the Shulamite, we know that they're obviously not at this point yet. But this serves to drive home what God asks for us on a faith level as well. Romans 12:1, therefore, brothers, in view of God's mercy, I urge you to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship, to offer your bodies, yourself, to God. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It's the same thing that Solomon and the Shulamite are going through. 3:1, all night long on my bed I looked for the one my heart loves. I looked for him, but did not find it. She is obviously expressing that yet to be fulfilled, that desire, that longing for one another, that wanting to be with Solomon. And we don't know if this expression is a dream. We don't know if it's another state, but she worries about losing her love. When you date someone, do you ever worry about losing them? I did. See, I was dating my wife for about a month and a half or 2 months at the time, and I was working in southern Lancaster. I didn't have a cell phone at the time. Yeah, that's that long ago. And I was working at a job where even if we did have a cell phone, it didn't matter because we were out of cell phone reception. We were working at a water treatment plant down in Octorara. And the guy I was working with, we had to go back to the plant and make a call back to the shop that day. So me and Benji drove back. And we drove back, and he gets off the phone. He goes, Scott, we got to go. I'm like, what's wrong? He goes, we got to go. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, Laurie was in an accident. I said, what happened? She got run over by a truck. What kind of truck? I don't know. How bad is she? I don't know. We just got to go. Now understand, it's an hour drive from where we're at to get back to where we need to go. And we don't have a cell phone. We'd only been dating for a month and a half at the time. But I can tell you that that was the moment that I knew I couldn't live my life without her. Because it was that moment I had to experience the reality of, even if it's only been a month and a half, what would my life look like? And I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to face that. I knew at that moment that she was the one for me. Think about the desperation. That's where this woman's at right now. She's starting to panic. Her heart is in pieces and she is becoming distressed. What does she do when she finds him in verse 4 then, right? She looks throughout the town. She finally finds him, and we get to verse 4, and this is great, isn't it? What's the first thing she does? Scarcely had I passed him when I found the one my heart loves. I held him and would not let go until what? I brought him to my mother's house. Exactly what every guy is looking forward to, right? I brought him to my mother's house. I mean, things change in a relationship when you meet the family, don't they? Things change when you meet the family. It's kind of like when you're at a family get-together and your cousin brings a boyfriend or girlfriend. You go, oh, okay, I guess it's getting a little serious, right? Or maybe it's just an immediate family. But all the walls of family weirdness are about to be broken here. Everything is crazy and it's going to get exposed within each of your families. And if you're unwilling to bring a boyfriend or girlfriend home to meet your family or to meet your parents, what does that say? Does it say something about your family or does it say something about that person? I mean, does it sound like a basis for a solid foundation or relationship? Because newsflash, guess what? All families are weird. All families are slightly off kilter. There's always that one person in every family that puts the fun in dysfunctional. Everybody's got it, some of us more than others. But she takes him to meet her mother, right? This was important to her. Doesn't that help confirm the relationship? And then we get to the end. She concludes what? By saying, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. Another way of putting it, we need to save ourselves until the time is right, until we are married. Once inside the commitment and the bond of marriage, sexual intimacy is permissible and encouraged. But outside of that is to be held until the proper time. Marriage is a covenantal relationship under the law of Moses. It is given and ordained by God. The problem is our society treats sexual intimacy as a rented car. And here's what I mean. Imagine that you save up for 3 years to buy the car of your dreams, the truck of your dreams, the motorcycle of your dreams, the vehicle that you've always wanted, that you've had in your heart to own. You save up for it, you meticulously do it, you plan for it, you scrimp, you put your pennies together, you sacrifice, and you save up and you buy that vehicle. And I don't know what it is. What do you do with that vehicle? You're probably not going to hit the trails first thing and get brushes, scraping over it, rocks kicking up on it. That's if it's a truck. Sorry, mine's a truck, my bad, right? You're going to treat that thing well. You're going to care for it. You're going to wash it by hand. Are you going to take it to the car wash and spray it with the hose? Probably not. You're going to wash it with hand with the soft terry cloth stuff. You're going to use the good soap. If you go somewhere, if I drive that vehicle to Walmart, where am I going to park? As far out as I can where nobody else is going to be around it. Because I don't want anybody to open up their door into it, right? I mean, everything you do in that vehicle for the first month, 2 months, 3 months, you're going to over and over and over analyze. Now, imagine the exact same car, and I mean the exact same car, except now you didn't buy it, you rented it. You're on a work trip for the week, and you've rented this vehicle. It's the exact same vehicle, and you've rented it. So you've gone to the rental agency, they give you the keys, you sign the rental insurance, and you go out. Are you going to treat that rental car the same way that you treat your brand new car? Absolutely not. Because I got renter's insurance, right? I got renter's insurance. Isn't that how society treats sexual intimacy? We treat it like a rented car when it's not, and it was never given that way. This courting process that these two young lovers are going through is to figure each other out, to get to know one another, to find out who they really, truly, and deeply are, so that when they enter this marriage, it can be awesome. Folks, the same thing is true with God and us. That's why marriage between people is such a beautiful example of the marriage between Christ and the church. The commitment, passion, and longing to be together to possess one another. There is a freedom to be found only on the other side of that commitment and that trust. And the woman knows this and demands it of Solomon. The man loves her back and accepts her actions because she is a woman that is in love with God, and that's terribly important to both of them. Why in the world would he want anything less? This time of courtship is vital to the relationship. It is vital to that of Jesus and the church as well. See, according to the book of Revelation, someday we will get to experience the wedding feast of the Lamb. But that day has not happened yet. We are in the courting phase. We're in the courting phase. We're working towards that wedding feast and the union of the church and Christ and the celebration that it will bring. And that's exciting. Let's be inspired by Solomon. Let's be inspired by the woman. And let's love Christ or learn to love Christ and God with that same love. Would you pray with me? Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for your presence in and among us. Thank you that it inspires us. And God, that is my prayer. That we would truly be inspired by your word. That it would hit us where we need hit. That it would grab our attention. And that your word would be living and active within us. That it would change our hearts. That it would mold us into the type of people you'd have us be. Help us to put aside our pride. Help us to love you more. Show us the way and give us the courage to follow. Amen.